Hello, welcome to part 1 of this series about the Indian Child Welfare Act. In part 2 of the series, we will dive into what's going on with the ICWA in the Supreme Court right now, but for part 1, I want to first cover what ICWA is, the history and context around ICWA, and how ICWA currently functions. The Indian Child Welfare Act, which I'll refer to as ICWA throughout this series, was established in 1978. The act was created to govern custody cases that involve Indigenous children in the United States. ICWA also gives tribal governments exclusive jurisdiction over cases where the child lives on a reservation or is a ward of the tribe, and concurrent jurisdiction over cases where the child does not meet those criteria. This functions to give tribal governments increased authority in custody cases involving children of their tribe. Ultimately, the purpose of ICWA is to decrease family separation within Indigenous communities and support Indigenous tribes' right to maintain their cultural identities. ICWA was enacted in response to a long history of family separation within Indigenous communities. This separation was often a part of a larger cultural genocide aimed to eradicate Indigenous languages, arts, foods, ways of life, and being. From the 1600s until the 1970s, Indigenous children were sent by the government to Indian boarding schools where they were forcibly assimilated into white culture and separated from their families and tribes. During that period, in 1958, the U.S. government created the Indian Adoption Project, the goal of which was to promote the adoption of Indigenous children by white families. In a 2022 CNN article, Navajo woman Hillary Tompkins wrote about her adoption through the IAP. She writes, "The Indian Adoption Project left me adrift, a foreigner in my own country. Upon my return to the Navajo Nation almost 30 years ago, my sense of loss was overwhelming. The Navajo Nation is a different world. One foundational principle is kinship, which is rooted in a vast clan system. I didn't know my clan and couldn't speak the language." ICWA was created in order to prevent experiences like this by keeping Indigenous families together. It does this in a few ways. Firstly, when an Indigenous child is up for adoption, members of the child's family are prioritized as potential adoptive parents. If the child cannot be placed within their own family, other members of their tribe are considered. If no one in their tribe can adopt the child, members of other Indigenous tribes are considered. If none of these avenues are available, the child is placed with a non-Indigenous family but may still be involved with their tribe as they grow up. Additionally, in foster care situations, ICWA requires that the state provide assistance to the Indigenous child's parents in the form of job placements or substance abuse rehabilitation, for example, in order to prevent the permanent breakup of the family. ICWA has received bipartisan support since its enactment, but the act is now being challenged in the Supreme Court in the case Brackeen v. Holland. Watch Part 2 to learn more.